when my children were little, I decided to write children's books because I was very interested in how children think. However, the children's books were all like for a 5-year-old, a 100-page book. That is not necessary, the poor 5-year-old. Anyway, and my husband, my first husband, was an editor and a writer. And one of the children's books, he said, well, you're quite a little stylist. Well, that was huge praise because he was quite a tough editor. Um, and so I thought, maybe I can, maybe I can. And anyway, so then I decided to go back and get a PhD. I majored in art history at Radcliffe and Barnard. So I thought I'd just keep going with that, thinking at that point that I would teach art history to 18-year-olds. That was my idea. But some of the teachers thought I wrote very well. And that was helpful. Teachers telling you can write is a very crucial thing. And I hope lots of young people get that affirmative thing. Um, anyway, in the PhD program, I really wanted to write either about Rothko, but mainly I wanted to write about Arshil Gorky. And then what happened was Max Kozloff, he was who he is. He's a critic, and he was also an editor at Art Forum, and he was a teacher at the Graduate Center of City University of New York. And he rented my mother's house in Mexico. And then he decided it was too fancy, so moved to a house nearby. And I then visited my mother. And Max and Joyce Kozloff, Joyce is a very good painter. I went and had dinner with them. And they met me at the door with a catalog from 1968 from the Mexican Olympics of Frida Kahlo Museum. I had tiny little reproductions. And I looked and I thought, this is really weird. These are so bizarre. But Max said, well, go to Mexico City, see her show. And being fairly dutiful, I went, and I was pretty overwhelmed by the paintings themselves. And, very surprised that I'd never even heard of this person. But then art history was very focused on European tradition at that point. So Mexico seemed, out of the question. But I went to the head of then I wrote the article for Art Forum. And then someone at Harper and Row, the poetry editor, asked me to write a book. So I thought, what shall I do? I really want to write about Gorky. And I was walking down the street with Magooch, who was my stepmother, but she was no longer my stepmother, but she was still my godmother. And she was Gorky's widow who married my father. And I told her about this, and she said, Gorky can wait, do Frida. And I thought about it, and it was sort of the moment of feminism. I mean, a big moment for feminism. And a lot of my art history teachers, like were Linda Nochlin, who was a very prominent feminist art historian. And she actually was the advisor for the Frida Kahlo dissertation. Anyway, so I decided to do it on Frida Kahlo. Went to the head of our department, said, can I write a biography of a Mexican artist? And thinking my field is American art, 20th century. And he said, sure, which sort of astounded me. I was very happy with that and did it. And it took 5 years. And then first it was a dissertation, and then I cut quite a lot out of it. I think it was a 2-volume dissertation, something like 900 pages. Anyway, it had to be shortened considerably, and it was published. But the advance they gave me just covered trips to Mexico to interview people. They had no sense that it was going to sell at all. At one point, they fired my editor, and they forgot that they'd even had a contract with this book. They completely forgot about it. So I thought, well, maybe you don't want to know all this, but I thought I'll take the book and go with my editor. and she went to Dial, I think it was. And I couldn't do it because suddenly Harper and Row realized that they had a contract and they gave me a new editor. And um, they, I think they printed 3,000 in the beginning, but not much. And then it started selling. And it was amazing. It was just exactly the right moment to have written that book. It was also the right moment for me in terms of that the sort of knowing a lot of women artists that were feminists. It just I found out who I was a little bit by writing that book, which I must say I've never read it. I should read it one of these days.